Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Center Your Compliance Around Strong Risk Management, this week's webinar about our Impero platform. So with me today, I have our Head of Customer Success, Morten. Good morning, Morten. And myself, Jenna Rasmussen, a Business Development Director. Before we get started, perhaps, Morten, you can quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, I can do that. My name is Morten Christensen. I'm heading our customer success department. I've been a part of Impero for a bit more than 6 years now, so I know a lot about all the small details, and I'll also be the one guiding you through the solution for today.
Brilliant, thank you. And as for myself, so I am, as I was saying, Business Development Director, bring a decade of experience from professional services, the Big Four, where I was in my most recent role heading up the enterprise risk management practice in Denmark. So you are definitely in good hands today. The agenda for the next half an hour will be, first of all, an introduction to Impero. So in a nutshell, who are we? What do we deliver? And then today we're gonna be basically going through a deep dive of our risk management module. So a bit more of a technical webinar today, where you can get to understand how the risk management module can basically help you get a full overview of your risk landscape and effectively manage these risks. We then also can very happily tell you about an upcoming release of the risk management module. So we have a few new features that are going to be released in next week. So throughout the next half an hour, you have the opportunity to ask questions. We're going to answer them as and when we go along. We're also going to hold time at the end to answer any questions that haven't been addressed throughout the webinar. So Impero in a nutshell. Overall, when we talk about Impero, it's a simple and easy to use compliance management platform. Consists of 3, overall modules. We have our risk management module. This is where we can basically identify our risks and we can evaluate our risks. We can basically assign these risks to individual entities, departments, etc., and get a complete overview of our risk exposure. The next module is the control management module. This is where we can define tasks and control. We can assign them to roles, responsibilities, and to a frequency. So we have our automated workflow, making sure that these tasks are being pushed out to the control performers and the reviewers. We then have our third module, the reporting module, which can basically sum up the two, making sure that these tasks and controls are being performed in a timely manner and as intended. So really easy to monitor and make sure that we actually address the risks that we have identified. Equal for all of these 3 modules is that we have a strong, documentation process. So we have our audit trail. We have the ability to basically use Impero as a, single source of truth. We can have our entire, risk management process, including a historic view. Morten is going to come back to that. And we have our control management module, where we can basically have all of our supporting documentation stored. So for audit purposes, it's easy to retrieve and have a look at. And likewise for the reporting, we have the ability to monitor over a given period, entity, etc. As I was saying in the beginning, today is going to be a deep dive into the risk management module. We do have other webinars around the other modules, so that will wait for some other time. But again, the next 30 minutes is basically for Morten to showcase how easy and simple risk management is when you leverage on Impero. So Morten, can you take us to Impero and show us the risk management module?
Yes, so let's dive straight into this now. Just signed into our Impero environment, and I'll go straight to the menu and jump into our risk management section, which is mainly what we will cover today. So basically in here, we see a few different things. First off, we are in the overview right now, meaning that these are all the different, we call them risk directories, that I have access to. So it might be that here there's one labeled Impero, that might be that, well, we need a different set of attributes for ESG or for compliance. Well, then we can have multiple risk directories in here. Then we also have the risk map level, basically where we can assess all of these risks. And finally, up here where we will begin here in a second, we have our entities as well, meaning that, well, we can actually populate whether it's a company or it's a country, or however you are organized at your organization. Then we can basically populate these entities in here and decide who should have access to these different entities. So let's just very short begin here, because that sort of explains some of the basic access management that we do in Impero. So if we just, as an example here, use the Impero German entity, you can of course create a new one. It will be the same view where we can define it. It's of course fairly flexible. You can give it a name, you can give it a description, decide who's responsible. Now it's me in this case here. I also have what we call an admin access. An admin, we also do a short text here, but in essence, it means that I can see everything, I can edit everything, and I can grant other users, as you can see here, I can add new users to this entity here. If I only had an edit access, well, then I can edit everything. I can also view everything, but I can't grant other users access to this specific entity. And finally, if you have a view access, you can see how everything has been assessed, but you can't really change anything. So these, and this goes actually throughout Impero, these are the three levels of access rights that we basically do. I'll get a bit more back to this example here, where we basically have the user that I'm currently signed in with, which is me as an admin. So this is the main focus for the beginning, and then I'll show, well, how does this actually look if you're a local user that only has access to one entity. Let's go back here to the overview, and today we're just gonna focus around one of these risk directories. And basically in a risk directory, you can see it's designed a little bit as a tree. So we have the first level here, and then we have all of our processes beneath here. So we have something within finance, tax, month-end close, compliance. We also have something within local risks and so on. But this can basically be tailored to suit the framework that you are using. So you can create your own processes. We can use finance here as an example. You can even do a sub process beneath this level here. And of course, in the end, we can add a risk. So let's just use this one here as an example. And this is the out-of-the-box risk management solution in Impero. So what that means is that all risks will consist of a name, a description, and a scope. So basically, we can decide, is this something we will want as a global risk that we can assign to multiple entities, a bit as a top-down approach, or is this a bit more bottom-up, where, well, now I'm in a local entity and I want to create the risk that only applies for my entity? Well, then I can do that using the local risk. I'll showcase this in a few minutes as well. The really strong part is actually this section here. Now I mentioned that this is the out-of-the-box solution where we use these financial statement assertions and objectives, which might make sense for finance purposes, but we're actually being used in a lot of different use cases. And this section here can basically be tailored into fit whatever framework that you're using, whatever reporting parameters that you actually wanna use. We have a few examples of these that I'll show or Shannon will show by the end of the presentation here. Once we have defined our process, our risk, just as this one here, then we define, well, which entities does this risk actually apply for? And again, we are now as an admin and a bit more in a top-down approach. We say, okay, this actually applies for these entities that we have here, but I can actually search. So let's just say that we didn't have the German one here, for instance. Well, then I could actually just add it here, and now it applies for this risk that we have here. So this is the very basic. This is where we define the processes, the risks, and we assign it to the different entities. That's a bit more on. It's not a one-off, but it's something that you need to do once. And of course, if there are changes or when things need to be re-evaluated, then we do that from here. If there are new risks or there are some risks that needs to be canned, then we can do that from this view here. The more, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So basically, this is where we identify our risks. We basically push these risks out to the people that knows the entity, the company the best. So we make sure that we get a fair reflection of the risk exposure. So next step is all about risk evaluation. We've now identified them. How do we assess and evaluate our risks?
Exactly, and we'll use the same one again here now. Just jump back to the overview. You can toggle back and forth between the risk directory and what we call the risk map. But you can also enter the actual assessment directly from here. So I'll just dive into Impero here. And if we just use the CM2 example here from before, then you can see on my screen here it actually appears multiple times here. And that's actually because we have this risk here, and then we assign it to multiple entities, and I have access to all of these different entities here. So again, a bit more of a real life example. Now we can just let's just focus on one that could be our German entity from before. Then I can of course zoom in on that, and then all I'll be able to see are basically all the risks that has been assigned to our German entity here. What I'll then do is that I can enter the risk, and I can of course see all the inherent values that we did from when we designed the risk. So I can see the title, the description, the scope. I can see all the other data here that we applied. Can't change any of this because it's inherent from the risk directory. But what I can do is I can say, okay, now I need to evaluate this risk. So if we do not do anything, then this risk here might be very high. Short comment on this is that this scale here is a 1 to 5. We do support 3 by 3, 4 by 4, also with different labels for whatever you guys are using. But let's say for the sake of the example here, that the impact might be high and the likelihood might be highly likely if we don't do anything. You'll see as soon as I did this, then it'll actually pop up here in the risk, in the heat map, sorry, here in the background. What I'll then do is that I'll actually say, well, what do we actually do about this risk here? Because we can mass assign from a central point of view all of these risks to all of the entities. And it could be that, well, this risk here actually is not applicable for the entity that I'm responsible for, so I can give the value here not applicable. Could also be that we transfer it by trying to move it to an insurance company or something like that. We could very simply just try to avoid the risk. Maybe we accept that we have it, but it might be too insignificant for us to actually do anything. It might be too costly to do anything about it. Or we could, as most commonly used, at least in Impero, is that we want to reduce the risk. And as soon as I select reduce here, then you'll see this little subsection here. And this is actually where we start linking our risk management towards our control management module. So I can basically say, well, now I'd like to add a mitigating action. So I'll add a control. I'll just search throughout the Impero environment. I'll just do this CM2 control here. I can see the basic detail. Again, as Jenny mentioned, we have a way more detailed webinar around the design of controls and how that works. Can work with the risk coverage here as well if needed. And then simply I just add the control here. And we can add multiple controls to mitigate this risk here if needed. And of course also this control here can mitigate multiple risks as well. Once that has been done, then we basically do our re-evaluation and say, well, because we do have these mitigating measures in place, then the impact, if the risk occurs, that might still be the same, but we've actually reduced the likelihood from highly likely to, let's just say, remote in this case here. And then we actually sort of have the entire journey of this risk here. So I can actually here see, well, now it's in my high in impact and highly likelihood, and I can sort of toggle back and forth here and see how the risks are actually moving, because we have our mitigating measures here in place.
Brilliant. Thank you, Morten. So basically now you've identified your risks, you have assigned them to entities. Each of the entity has evaluated their risks, and you can sit at a local level or at a global level, group level, and you can get a complete overview of your risk landscape, easy overview with your risk map. Very strong tool to basically go to management or board and show them this is our risk exposure before controls and after controls.
Exactly. And I'll actually just very briefly showcase. So now, I'm not saying this this can be confusing, but the view that we're in right now has access, as you can see, to a lot of different entities. I can do quite a lot because I'm an admin, but a bit more of a real life example might be that I actually only have access to one entity, and it's the same environment here that we are in. I'm just signed in, if you recall back to our local user here from before. So if we do the exact same steps, so we go to the menu, we dive into our risk management, you'll see here that I cannot see all the other stuff that we could before. I can only see the items that are actually relevant for me. So if I go to the entity tab, you can see I only have access to the German entity here, so I can't see any of the others. I also can't create a new one, and because I only have an edit access, I also can't grant other users access to this entity here. However, what I can do is that I can go to, let's just go to the risk map here in the first place, just to showcase this is, of course, the exact same view as what we did before when I zoomed in on the German entity, but without actually applying any filter or whatsoever. Then I can actually see here the risks that I'm supposed to mitigate, I'm supposed to do something about. So this is basically the only thing that I see, whereas, well, someone who has access to multiple entities will see them in one view. Then when I only have access to one, then it's actually fairly easy because I only see the items that I'm supposed to do anything about. And just to link a bit back to the difference between the local and the global risks, then in my risk directory here, and I'll just swap back, then I can of course again see all the risks here that has been assigned to my entity. I can create a new one here on this level here, but however, what I can do is that here under my local risks, I can actually add a new one. I can add a new risk, just for this sake of the example here, call it local risk 1. I can do a description. As you can see here, I can't do a global one because I only have access to my German entity. So I can't do a risk that applies for all of the entities in this environment here. I can only do a local risk. If you had access to multiple, then you could select from this drop down here. I don't, so I only have this one option. And then I can of course apply my data here just as the example from before, and I hit OK here. And as you can see, it works in more or less in the exact same way. We just apply this little location marker here, so we actually just visually say that this is a local risk. And if I switch back to my risk map here, then I'll also now have a new risk that I need to assess. That's labeled local risk 1. But let's say that, well, Shanna has access to our Danish entity or to our UK entity. Well, then when she signs in, she will not be able to see this risk here because it only applies for our German entity.
Brilliant. So again, we've now shown you how you can basically leverage on the risk management module to perform a top-down assessment. So you can sit at a group level and you can basically push out these risks to be evaluated by the local entities. And likewise, we have showcased how you can basically use a bottom-up process where you have your local entities basically feeding up the risks that they are exposed to. So all in all, we have this complete overview of the risk landscape where we nicely tie together the top-down and the bottom-up approach. So this was a, introduction to the risk management module. As you can tell, it's very simple, it's easy to use. We have a high level of flexibility, so we have the ability to basically build the hierarchy that matches your, say, compliance area or your, say, entity organization structure. And likewise, with the simplicity, we bring a simple risk card, but also we have the flexibility to basically tailor it in to match your risk framework. And I think that would be a good idea now to just show a few examples of what some of these, say, tailored risk cards can look like. And again, it's important to stress that these are just examples, and again, they can very easily be tailored into matching your needs. But it may be that you are sitting and thinking, well, when I perform my risk assessment, I of course want to understand what's the monetary impact when I perform this as risk. So if and when it materializes, how much does it cost me? But I'm also interested in understand what's the reputational damage that this risk may cause, or what's the compliance risk, strategic risk, etc. You get the point. So we basically have the ability to add multiple dimensions to our risk evaluation, and we can even say support this with say how well a calculation of a intelligent risk score. We also have the ability to attach information such as who is the process owner, who is the risk owner, the entity owner, so that you can basically pinpoint the say roles and responsibilities to each of the risks. So I think what you see on the screen here is basically the first example that we have prepared for you today. And on the next slide, we have basically created another example where you can see, apart from the multiple dimensions where we can determine the strategic impact, the operational impact, etc., we can also pinpoint it down to region and country if we need other dimensions, and we can even determine the monetary value in each of these, say, areas such as tax penalties, interest, etc. So again, it comes really simple, and you can basically build it and make it as advanced as needed to match your framework. And as we were saying in the beginning, so this is only a, say, deep dive of the risk management module today. Morten briefly showed you how we can basically connect this link to our control management module so that we make sure that these risks are also addressed appropriately. That will be showcased in another webinar some other day. So Morten, I think that we basically, I think, intrigued our attendees today by saying that we have an upcoming release in next week. So perhaps you can talk them through what they can expect in the future.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll just jump back to Impero here. So as we have highlighted here, then this is a very strong tool to see the as is picture. So if I change any of the values here, so let's say now I'm in Germany here, my AP8 overdue creditors, I need to reevaluate that. Maybe we have an additional measure. So I'd actually say, well, now we have reduced this risk here to remote. All I'll be able to see here is the current view. So when I change this from unlikely to remote, all that basically happened is that the risk jumped from the unlikely to remote. So we don't sort of have that, we call it risk history, but essentially the journey of the risk. So maybe in year one, it was assigned to these 10 entities here, and they all came back with the impact and likelihood. They sort of assessed all of the risks, and they reassessed them a year after, but that process of what actually happened, how did it actually look in the past, we as of today don't have that option. But as Shan mentioned, that we have an upcoming release in next week. So basically what we'll do is that we will have an ability up here in the menu to go back to historic risk map, and it would look actually just like what you see right now. We'll just have a date picker up here on the right side, so I can actually go back and see how did this risk landscape here actually look on a specific date. I think it will be for those of you who might already be familiar with Impero, and maybe you are clients already. Then we are going back to 1st of January this year. So basically, we behind the scenes sort of already have that information, so you will be able to go a month and a half back in time initially. But of course, as we move along, you will be able to go all the way back to the beginning. That's just one of the features. Now this is around risk management, so I'll keep it to that. But we do have some quite exciting things that we'll release next week.
Brilliant, thank you, Morten. So we have one question from one of the attendees asking, so I'm interested in getting started. We already have this in Excel. Do we have to build it from the ground up?
Yeah, so I think that now in my team we actually do quite a lot of these transitions from Excel to Impero, and I'd say that it's most likely, at least what we see is that it's actually defined somewhere near how Impero also looks, and we can help you adapt into that. And if it's something that you have assessed already, then we can also actually do an initial upload of these predefined answers. So let's say that, well, we have already worked with this in our organization, and we've already told all of our entities to actually provide a feedback in Excel, but maybe we are growing to a stage where we need to have it supported by a tool, maybe like Impero. Well, then we can also help you upload these answers quite easy, so they don't have to do any reassessments, at least initially.
Brilliant. So essentially, when you join the Impero platform, when you get access to the Impero platform, Morten and his team, the customer success team, is basically helping you from the implementation to the onboarding, the training, and ongoing support, so that you make sure that you get a say great experience. It speaks nicely into the next question from another attendee asking, so now we talked about upload, and the next question is then, are we able to export this out of the system?
Yeah, and we are. It's the short answer here. We can export, and that again goes throughout the Impero solution. We export to Excel right now, so I can click this button up here, and it will provide me with an Excel overview of, well, all my risks, and of course all the entity information, all the inherent impact likelihood, residual impact likelihood, and actually also some basic information around mitigating controls. And I'll also be able to get the overview of, well, do we have any controls that we haven't linked to any risk yet? Then I'll also, that I have access to, then I'll also be able to see those.
Brilliant. Thank you, Morten. So that's all that we had on our agenda today. As I was saying, deep dive into the risk management module. You are more than welcome to keep an eye on our website, where you can see upcoming webinars around our control management module and our reporting module. I hope you found this insightful, and we look forward to welcoming you back to our next webinars. So thank you and have a great day.